I watched what happened in the United States with Trump and Clinton. I thought people liked the unscripted, impulsive lies of Trump better than the scripted, instrumental lies of Clinton. I think part of what happened to Trump was that tough part of him played well, especially to working class people. And I think that there was an element of that was very genuine, especially contrasted with Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, what would you call it, patronizing attitude towards working class people.
Jordan Peterson delves into the controversy and complexity surrounding Donald Trump, revealing surprising insights about his rise to power and the polarizing effects that he has on society.
I don't think that he's a psychopath because he's been successful in repeated enterprises over long periods of time, and he has a variety of people who remain intensely loyal to him. Now, he's definitely extroverted to a very great degree, and he's definitely disagreeable.
As contentious as their relationship may be, Jordan Peterson's thoughts on Donald Trump reveal a complex and fascinating intersection between politics and psychology, leaving us wondering, can we truly understand one without the other?
Trump is an anomaly, in my estimation. He isn't a typical Republican. He's quite bombastic and assertive. He's not a typical conservative. In fact, he wasn't a conservative, I don't think, at all before.
He's a registered Democrat,
well,
I think.
Yeah, and he's got an entrepreneurial bent as well, and entrepreneurial types tend to be liberal. So he's a strange person. He's an idiosyncratic person. And the one thing I would say in his favor, as far as I'm concerned so far, is that he has not embroiled the U.S. in an additional stupid war. And that's happened a lot in the last 15 years, and the fact that that hasn't happened so far, I'm quite happy about.
As one of the most influential thinkers of our time, Jordan Peterson's insight on politics and leadership are highly sought after. And when he speaks about Donald Trump, it's impossible not to feel the weight of his analysis and the depth of his understanding of the issues at play.
And so I wonder with Trump if he's pushed into a corner because of all the vitriol. The bullying and braggadocio tendency has become exaggerated. Maybe he's more surrounded by sycophants now than might be helpful. Now, I don't know that for sure, but it looks to me like something like that is happening. I didn't say that Trump's record was unblemished or that there weren't skirmishes of various sorts. I'm not trying to paint him beige, or I'm not trying to whitewash him. I'm perfectly aware of Trump's flaws and his advantages. But he didn't embroil the U.S. in a war, and you guys have been embroiled in a pointless war for what? How long now? Since the 1960s? One after another. And then the Abraham Accords are a big deal. And did he betray the working class? Well, I think that's in some sense a vague question. Hillary definitely betrayed the working class because she decided to go with the woke mob instead of the typical base of power that the Democrats had always relied on. I think it's a strategic error on his part, at minimum. I mean, Trump portrays himself and thinks of himself as a winner, and part of his attractiveness on the populist front was his unabashed, victorious persona, let's say. And he's the guy that gets things done, and he's the guy that wins. But apparently, the election was stolen from him. And so that begs the question, are you the winner and the guy that gets things done, or are you the guy that lets things be stolen from you? And the answer that Trump had always had was, well, I'm not the guy. I'm not that guy. I don't know who else I am, but I'm definitely the winner here. And I think that now campaigning as if he was the victim, let's say, of a plot isn't going to do him any good. I think it was probably a fatal decision from a strategic perspective because it's so off-brand. And that has nothing, that's completely independent of whatever virtue the argument about the stolen election might have. Well, I don't believe that the judiciary in the United States is so corrupt that the possibility of a valid finding on the election fraud front has been reduced to zero. I don't find that credible. And I do think, so I also think that it's a mistake on that front. And it's a mistake for conservatives It's a real mistake for conservatives to take that route, because conservatives can't say all the institutions are corrupt and untrustworthy. That's what the radical leftists say. And populist conservatives tend to do that, and that really leaves them with nothing except maybe an appeal to public whim, and that's no way to govern. So I think that was a mistake too. Here's my dilemma with Trump, one of many. He's beating the election was stolen drum pretty damn hard. And I look at that as an outsider again, because I'm Canadian, and I think, well, you Americans, you've been split 50-50 for like 5 decades, like right down the middle, eh? And there's always election trouble, because no system is 100% perfect. Maybe there's like a 1%, 2% margin of crookedness, something like that. And you're probably really not going to get rid of that. Maybe you can maneuver carefully to keep it so that it's never any more than 1 or 2%. But to get rid of that last bit of malfeasance and deception and corruption would take such a heavy hand that that would become worse than the problem. That's a real problem when you're split 50-50, because small election irregularities can throw the whole election. Okay, so it isn't obvious precisely what can be done about that, but the election was stolen narrative, I think it's weak for a variety of reasons. The first is, it's pretty whiny. Like, why didn't you win with 5% margin then? So how do you know this isn't your fault? And you think the Republicans aren't gerrymandering congressional districts? Because they are. And so it's not obvious that even if it is the case that there is substantive election fraud, that it's all from one side. And so there's that. And then, you're sure that's the message you want to be sending people? That they shouldn't have faith in their most fundamental institution? You might be right, but it's in your interest for that to be true. And so that's a moral hazard. And then, well, what happens when you retake the House? Because that's what's going to happen. I think the Democrats are going to get stomped in the upcoming election. Are those elections somehow valid, but yours wasn't? And so why magically when the Republicans get elected, that's honest, but when they don't, it's not? And so doesn't that take the wind out of your story? It's like, well, it was stolen. Well, you have the House and the Senate. How do you account for that? So that, to me, that's going to weaken that narrative. Trump is capitalizing on anger. He's using the election issue as a means to an end. And he may believe it, but it doesn't matter because it's a weak story. But I've been able to understand he's also very conscientious and hardworking, for example. And so that's a real mitigating factor. And so I think it's very easy to demonize someone that you don't approve of, let's say, and certainly Trump has been subject, I would say, to more demonization than any political leader in the West that I can remember in my entire lifetime, including Richard Nixon. And so that's also set him back on his heels and made him somewhat embattled and defensive, which I don't think did any great things for his personality in some real sense. So I think it's a mistake to assume that Trump is a psychopath. I think it's a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake to assume that Putin is a psychopath. It's easy to do that, but I don't think the evidence suggests that. You don't want to throw those labels around casually. And, you know, if Trump was psychopathic, well, he did a pretty good job of keeping the United States clear of war for 4 years. That's pretty damn remarkable. And he did have a big hand in promoting the Abraham Peace Accords, and that was pretty remarkable. And those aren't the sorts of things that you would expect from a psychopath. He also seems to have a pretty good hand with the working class. No, I don't think it would be good for America. Would it be good for him to run? That's a difficult question, because it might be that it would be good for America to have whether or not Donald Trump should be president sorted out in the public sphere, debated intensely, and subject to an election. So it might be very interesting to see him put himself forward on the Republican ticket. If I had my druthers, and I say this, I hope with due care, I would rather see someone like DeSantis step forward, who shares some of that forthright strength, let's say, that characterizes Trump at his best, but seems to be a more cautious administrator and a less divisive figure. I think that would be better, because Trump, for whatever virtues he might have, and I think he has the virtues of a Washington outsider, I think that's quite clear. I think that his behavior in the political realm raises the political temperature to a dangerous degree.
Yeah.
And, I say that while trying to give the devil his due and not casting careless aspersions on his name.
Yeah.
When I watched what happened in the United States with Trump and Clinton, I thought people liked the unscripted, impulsive lies of Trump better than the scripted, instrumental lies of Clinton.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Trump gave a different speech generally when he went from audience to audience. He kind of shoots from the hip, kind of, a lot. And it isn't obvious to me that shooting from the hip is really the right way to lead a country. But calculating everything beforehand for maximum impact on your political future, that is also not a way to run a country. And that's how you get pulled into politics by handler, by PR, by opinion poll, by image. You see politicians, we have to protect our image. It's like, really? Do you? You have to protect your image, do you? What's your image exactly? Well, it's what we want people to think we are. Well, how about you be that instead of being the image of that? The Trump phenomenon probably worries me less than people think it should. But there are reasons for that. The first reason is that I don't really think that the American people are more polarized now than they were 10 years ago. And the reason I think that is because for 20 years, 50% of them have voted for Republicans, 50% of them have voted for Democrats. It hasn't moved. It's been exactly the same. Now, this time they had Clinton and Trump as candidates, and perhaps that was unfortunate. He's noisy, he's provocative, that's for sure. He seems impulsive, although it's hard to tell how much of that is crafted, He's definitely disagreeable, which is quite interesting, and that comes out in his Twitter behavior and so forth, and in the way that he handles his political allies, for that matter. He's certainly not currying favor, and you can make the case that he's a divisive figure, and perhaps that's the case. I think part of what happened to Trump was that tough part of him played well, especially to working class people, and I think that there was an element of that was very genuine, especially contrasted with Hillary Clinton and the Democrats' what would you call it, patronizing attitude towards working class people. And Trump could speak to people directly, and he had that bluntness that disarmed them in some sense and made them believe that he was, at least in many ways, dealing an honest hand. Now, he suffered a tremendous amount of assault through vitriol when he was running for president and when he was president, probably more than any president that I can remember, including Richard Nixon, who I think might have run second for having most abuse dumped on him. And whether or not that's deserved is independent. I think in Trump's case, it was over the top in quite a remarkable way. And so I think that probably elicited more of that bullying behavior that might be perhaps a weakness. I've been trying to understand him, and the bullying, the last interview you did with him, I believe, one of the things I noted about Trump was that he would do something about every 10 minutes that was markedly out of the ordinary conversationally. And so I watch for that because I'm a clinician. And so I always watch people talk to see when they're going off script, let's say, because there's always something underneath that. Make statements that are way over the top. So I think he said, for example, when you were interviewing, something like, "I tell the truth more than anyone ever has in history." And then he said about 10 minutes later, something like, "I've run the best administration in American history." And they're over the top, preposterous statements, and they have this self-aggrandizing element that's got a juvenile flavor to it. And I'm not doing a global critique of Trump's personality because I suspect, as you've already indicated, that he's a multifaceted person. But there's an element of him he's got this 10-year-old bully part of him that also has a a compensatory element. And so to say, I tell the truth more than anyone has in history or something along those lines, I think, well, like, who are you comparing yourself here to exactly? Like, you tell the truth more than Jesus Christ. You run a better administration than Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. And it's marked because people don't generally do that in conversation, right? They don't come out with a preposterous statement about how remarkable they are with some degree of regularity. And now it seems to me to be associated with some other tendencies that he has. Like, he has a tendency to nickname people, and he has unerring accuracy in doing that, and it can be devastating. Because I also think, and I've talked to lots of Republicans about this, is that the best story you've got? You got tradition on your side. You got the truth as an adventure on your side. You got belief in truth on your side. That's been abandoned by the radical left. You've got belief in science on your side. You've got responsibility on your side. You've got the fundamental purpose of higher education on your side. You can't conjure up a better story for Americans than the election was stolen with all that on your side? That's just not very impressive.
In a riveting exploration at the frontier of human intellect and machine mastery, Jordan Peterson issues a stark warning on the looming perils of artificial intelligence. Brace yourselves as he unravels the dystopian dance between human consciousness and technological dominance, revealing a future where our very essence collides with the creations of silicon sentience. Peterson's urgent call to navigate the uncharted waters of AI unfolds in a dramatic narrative, a cautionary tale echoing through the digital corridors, urging us to confront the profound questions that await at the crossroads of humanity and the algorithmic unknown.
So this AI system, it's a general language processing model, was released about a week and a half ago, and I went and interacted with it. It's an AI system, artificial intelligence system. It basically is trained on, well, a massive corpus of spoken or of text. The autonomous cars that are being developed, people still think about those as cars, but that isn't what they are. They're autonomous self-learning robots. And the fact that they happen to take the form of cars at the moment is almost irrelevant. They're no more cars than cars were horseless buggies, right? They're a whole new thing. And what's really interesting about robots like that is that they're all identical, right? More or less.
Jordan Peterson delivers a stark warning about the impending future of AI, raising profound concerns.
But you can certainly see how that's going to get out of hand in a staggering way, like it has in China on the digital currency front. Because once every single bloody thing that you buy can be tracked, let's say by a government agency, then a tremendous amount of your identity has now become public property. But the new AI systems will be able to extract out patterns from the world itself, from images and so forth, and then be able to test their linguistic constructions against the world. And so they'll practice just like scientists. And the most advanced models are going to use text and image and action as well, because they'll be able to model human action.
The breakneck speed of AI development emerges as a source of disquiet, prompting contemplation on its implications.
And what that means is that when one learns something, every one of them learns it at the same time. And so even if they're not very bright, if there's 10 million of them or 100 million of them, and they're all learning one thing a day, that's 100 million new things a day that every one of them is learning. And so they're mapping the road and they're learning how to operate in a natural environment, which is a really big deal. Like, it's a really, really big deal. They're learning to map the perception of the world onto action, which is really the definition, a good definition in some sense of intelligence. Well, I guess the downside would be, is it possible for it to exist in a very protected environment? Now, you've been working on that technically, so a couple of practical questions there. Is this gadget that you've been starting to develop, do you have anything approximating a commercial timeline for its release?
Peterson paints a chilling picture where even our identity becomes vulnerable, exposed to the whims of rapidly advancing AI.
We don't even know if we need to be worried about Facebook, because God only knows if it'll even exist in 5 years. It could even be the same with Google. So, we're worried about machines that are changing so fast that we can't figure out what exactly we should be worried about. Because, who was thinking about YouTube 5 years ago? No one. It's like cute cat videos. Who cares about YouTube? But it turns out that YouTube is an unbelievably powerful social force because it makes the spoken word as universally transmissible and as permanent as the written word, right? So it's a Gutenberg revolution. And it might even be more profound than Gutenberg revolution because it's possible that people can listen better than they can read. And they can listen when they're doing other things, which is what happens in the podcast world. And lots of my students now listen to podcasts instead of listening to music, or they listen to podcasts instead of reading. They speed them up. These are massive, massive technological changes, and they're all happening in parallel. We have no idea what the consequences of that are going to be.
Delving into the depths of AI's evolution, Peterson elucidates the genuinely unsettling facets that lie ahead.
AI systems will be able to calibrate their linguistic knowledge against knowledge of images in the world soon. And that's basically what scientists do, right? Because scientists will take a verbal hypothesis and then test it against the actual world. And if the hypothesis and the world fit, then you think, well, that's scientifically verified. And Keller thinks that AI systems will be able to do that pretty soon. And pretty soon means as soon as someone builds one that can do it, because the tech is already in place. And so I have no idea what that's going to mean, and it could easily lead us astray. So here's something that's going to happen in the next year. So imagine now you're a lonesome guy, and you can get a digital friend, a woman, and she can talk to you like ChatGPT talks to you and listen like ChatGPT listens to you, which is maybe, if you're really lonesome and alienated, more than anyone has ever listened to you in your life. And then soon, she'll not only listen to you as a text interface, but she'll be a fully rendered 3D, let's say 2D photorealistic, fully rendered animation, indistinguishable from a genuine image of a genuine person. And then that'll be 3D for your, Oculus headset. And then, that'll be like just right now. That'll be the value proposition, right? Is you'll be able to turn your virtual girlfriend into your virtual partner. And who knows what that'll do?
I've been thinking about doing that on something approximating the IQ testing front, because people keep gerrymandering the measurement of general cognitive ability. But I could imagine putting together a sophisticated blockchain corpus of, let's say, general knowledge questions, and ChatGPT can generate those like mad, by the way. So you can imagine a data bank of 150,000 general knowledge questions that was blockchain, so nobody can muck about with the answers, from which you could derive random samples of general ability tests that would be, they'd be 100% robust, reliable, and valid, and nobody could gerrymander them. Just the way Bitcoin stops fiat currency producers from inflating the currency, the same thing could happen on the knowledge front. So I guess that's the sort of thing that you're referring to.
Anxiety mounts as the pace of machine transformation accelerates, leaving us struggling to discern the precise nature of our worries.
Well, we'll see. Elon Musk, one of the things he's working on, he thinks that the world will be controlled by whoever produces the most functional AI system the fastest, because there'll be a first mover advantage. And one of the things Musk has been working on for a long time are distributed AI systems, so that you'll have your own artificial intelligence to protect you against, let's say, against Google's artificial intelligence, for starters.
Uncertainty looms large on the horizon, driven by the relentless and unpredictable changes in AI technology.
A self-help book is like that in a primitive way.
Yes.
Because it's essentially a spiritual guide, in that if you equate the movement of the Spirit with forward movement through the world, like faith-based forward movement through the world. And so this would be the next iteration of that in some sense. I mean, that's what we've been experimenting with, this system that I mentioned that contains all the lectures that I've given and so forth. I mean, you can now ask it questions, which means it's a book, but it's a book personalized to your query.
Peterson forewarns of a future where AI systems seamlessly integrate linguistic and visual knowledge, blurring once distinct boundaries.
But there are things, and everyone in the audience should know this, there are things coming down the pipeline on the artificial intelligence front that are just going to make your hair stand on end within the next year, because there is so much transformation going on in that domain. And that's been the case particularly for the last 6 months, that it's almost unimaginable. You're going to see things you just can't possibly. How many of you clap? How many of you know what ChatGPT is? Okay. So not very many. So I'll tell you what ChatGPT is, just so you know, because you need to know this. And I don't know what sort of technological revolution this is. Gutenberg press level? It's something like that. This is a big deal. So it's derived its models of the world from the analysis of human speech, essentially. It isn't using real world data yet, but that will be happening certainly within the next year.
The potential for AI to mislead becomes a disconcerting reality, posing intricate challenges to navigate in the evolving landscape.
Robots have been tricky, but I can't imagine that's more than 10 years away. And that's just one thing that's going to happen, maybe not even the most surreal thing. Pretty soon we'll be contending with the fact that someone will be able to generate a photorealistic version of Donald Trump and have him say something absolutely reprehensible and spread it everywhere just before election night. And there'll be a real confusion about whether he said it or didn't. So what do we do when our representations of reality can be falsified? Now, I was talking to my son about that today, and he thinks we'll get into an arms race right away because there'll be technologies that can detect whether video is artificial. But then, there'll be a race because other technologies will learn how to fool that technology, and maybe we'll be able to stay on the edge where we can still detect what's real and what isn't. But I don't think we're doing a very good job of that right now on social media, because social media, it's kind of like the world, except it's way more demented. And the problem with that is that it makes the whole world look demented.
A somber prophecy unfolds as Peterson asserts that the world's fate may hinge on the producer of the most advanced AI.
So my concern fundamentally is that these machines will reflect us ethically. And that should be frightening, because I wouldn't say that our ethical house is particularly in order. So they're going to magnify what we are. The Google guys can talk about the mind of God, but that's making the presumption that the thing that we're building will be a good thing. And I don't think that it will be a good thing because it will reflect us.
In a poignant conclusion, Peterson underscores the dual nature of AI, holding the promise of human progress or serving as the harbinger of our downfall.
So you're envisioning a future very rapidly, it's already here, where we're already androids. And that is already the case, because a human being with an iPhone is an android. Now, we're still mostly biological androids, but it isn't obvious how long that's going to be the case. And so what that means, like I've laughed for years, I have a hard drive on which everything I've worked on has now been stored since 1984. And I joke, there's more of me in the hard drive than there is in me. And it's not a joke, really, because...
Yeah, it's real.
It's real, right? There's tens of thousands of documents on that hard drive. And weirdly enough, I know where every single one of them is. So...
Wow.
So now we're going to be in a situation... So what that means is we're in a situation now where a lot of what actually constitutes our identity has become digital. And we're already being in relationship to that digital identity, mostly by credit card companies. Now, I would say to some degree, they're benevolent masters, because the credit card companies watch what you spend, and so how you behave, where you go, and they broker that information to other interested capitalist parties. Now, the downside of that obviously is that these parties know often more about you than you know about yourself. I've read stories, for example, of advertisements for baby clothes being targeted to women who A, didn't know they're pregnant, or if they did, hadn't revealed it to anyone else.
You know, you hear babies have no theory of mind. It's like, yeah, no, they can imitate. That's pretty bloody amazing, man. Like, you haven't seen robots that can do that yet. Although there are robots now that you can teach by moving their arms. You move their arms and then they'll do it. And so you can actually program them by moving them, and then they'll just repeat it. And so they're getting close to imitation. They're really getting close. And then look out, man, because they're going to be imitating each other as well as us. And they're going to do it so fast, you just won't be able to believe it.